Hello and welcome back to another episode of a Cozy Christmas podcast. My name is Art. Welcome back. I'm so glad to be back. We are in full swing of summer here in Iowa. A lot of heat, humidity has been on its way, but I'm excited because this episode should come out on June 24th or so, which means tomorrow, June 25th, is Leon's Day, which, if you don't know, that's the 6th month mark to Christmas. It always seems like this is the turning point where from here on out, each day brings us closer and closer to Christmas of 2024. Now, I don't mean to brag, but we've had almost a whole month in our house with nobody getting sick, which, considering the way this year's been, that's a pretty impressive feat. It is a Leon Day miracle. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have a great story to read to you today, as well as some other tidbits of information for you. Let's go and start the show. First of all, let's do a Christmas book corner or a cozy Christmas book corner. I don't remember what I used to call it. Anyway, I've got a couple of books to recommend to you that I've been reading this year. First of all, our book club, the Cozy Christmas Book Club, has just started reading The Christmas Train by David Balducci. Why do I struggle with his name so much? There is a movie based on the book, which I have not seen, but that might be fun to watch after we read the book. But it says that this book is about a journalist on a cross-country Christmas train scales the rugged terrain of his own heart. Disillusioned journalist Tom Langdon must get from Washington to Los Angeles in time for Christmas. Forced to travel by train, he begins a journey of rude awakenings, thrilling adventures, and holiday magic. He has no idea that the locomotives pulling him across America will actually take him into the rugged terrain of his own heart, as he rediscovers people's essential goodness and someone very special he believed he had lost. And that's the book we're going to be reading this summer, pretty much June through August. At the time of this recording, I've only read the first chapter, but I already really enjoyed it. It just introduces us to the character of Tom Langdon and why he's having to take the train from New York to Los Angeles. He gets into some trouble with the TSA at the airport and has been banned from flying, so he has to take a train cross country. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to take a train ride. One of our book club members asked the question, has anybody ever taken a train ride? And I've been able to. I would love to hear your experiences also. You could write me at cozychristmaspodcast@gmail.com. But when I was I was almost 20 years old, and I was moving from Washington State to Iowa. And so I decided to take the train. Couldn't afford plane tickets anyway. And I didn't have much to carry. So I got on the train. We went down south through Washington, Oregon, and into California. The Sacramento Valley area of California was stunningly gorgeous. I woke up in the morning just as the sun was rising, got to see it. It's still a memory I have in my mind as being very beautiful. We had a 5-hour layover in Sacramento, and this was in the summer, so it was pretty hot. And then started heading east, and I got to go through places I've never been, like going through all the deserts of Nevada. And every once in a while, as it got to be night, you would see just desert and desert and desert, and then off in the distance, these little clumps of little towns just gathered, just sitting there. You see the lights of the town, not much there. And I just wondered about the people who lived there, what their life is like, and how close was the nearest town to them. As I think about it now, it's almost like Christmas lights in the distance, just the lights of the little town lit up the desert. Really beautiful. And then the highlight was going through Colorado, because the train took us through, I forget how many different canyons and areas, but The conductor there said that the only way into this area was either by train or by hiking in. There was no roads to access it. So it was pretty rugged areas we were living in, or we were traveling through. But they have an observation car. I took Amtrak. So they had an observation car you could sit in, and just huge windows. You could see all the beautiful scenery around. They really made it the whole traveling experience a lot of fun. We stationed at one point just outside of Reno. It was just a quick layover, but I remember it being so hot there that it felt like my shirt was literally melting on me. And then we get into the more plain Midwest that didn't quite have as many beautiful scenes. But I remember Nebraska being just kind of a breath of fresh air after the stifling heat of Nevada and Arizona. But I would love to take another train ride again sometime. It's something I always wanted to do again. I just never had the chance to do it. Well, maybe in my retirement years. So do you have a favorite train memory? Do you have a Christmas memory involving trains? I'd love to hear from you. So another book I finished not that long ago I would recommend is a cozy mystery. It's set at Christmas. This one is called Death of a Christmas Caterer, and it's book 5 in the Haley Powell Food and Cocktails mystery. Haley Powell is a character who writes a food column for their local newspaper. Here's what the book is about. Who better than food and cocktails columnist Haley Powell to book a caterer for the Island Times holiday party? That's the newspaper she works for. But Haley's quest for a cook turns into the pursuit of a killer who caters to no one. Office Christmas parties can sometimes mean career suicide, but they rarely lead to murder. Haley thought Garth Rawlings would be the perfect caterer for this year's bash, but when the gourmet sees her budget, he goes galloping. Unfortunately, his run is short-lived. Garth is found dead on the floor of his kitchen, with his delectable creations burning in the oven. Faced with a spread of suspects, Haley is determined to discover who would want to take out the Christmas caterer, because, no matter what the season, justice must be served. I love that. Now, Lee Hollis is the writing team of a brother and sister, and I had Lee Hollis on the podcast along with Lynn Cahoon and Maddie Day back in July of last year. They were talking about their fall collection called Christmas Mittens Murder. If you remember that, that was so fun to talk to 3 big names in the cozy mystery world. I was a little awestruck. That was such a great fun conversation. Anyway, all that aside, this was a really fun read, and this is a long-running series. There's, I think, about 17 or 18 books in it, and I just came to it a bit late, so I've been reading through off and on since a year or two ago. I actually came across his books through one of those collections that Kensington puts out, holiday-themed novellas. So I really enjoyed the one I read, so I started back and started reading through the whole series. It has all my favorite elements of a cozy mystery. There's good food, there's recipes, there's some really funny characters. I think a pretty interesting murder. And again, the cover of the book is also very cozy and Christmassy. So if you like to decorate with books during the holiday season, this is one you'd want to have out on display for sure. That's again called Death of a Christmas Caterer by Lee Hollis. And that's what I'm reading for Christmas this month. Well, now I get the privilege of reading you a Christmas story. The story today is called Christmas in the Alley by Olive Thorne Miller. And it's from a collection called Christie's Queer Christmas, published in 1904. Harriet Mann Miller, who wrote under pen names of Olive Thorne and Olive Thorne Miller, she was born on June 25th, 1831. So there's a really strong Christmas connection here, okay? She was born on June 25th, 1834. That's Leon Day. And she died on December 25th, 1918, obviously on Christmas Day. So she had a good long life. Wikipedia says that she was an American author, a naturalist, and ornithologist, which, if you don't know, is the study of birds. She was one of the first 3 women raised to elective membership in the American Ornithologists Union, and Miller wrote stories for leading magazines. At the start of her career, her articles appeared under the pen name Olive Thorne, while after marriage, she used the signature of Olive Thorne Miller. Her books include Little Folks in Feathers and Fur, 1879, Queer Pets at Marcy's in 1880, Little People of Asia, 1882, Birds' Ways in 1885, In Nesting Time, 1888, and also a serial story entitled Nimpo's Troubles, published in the St. Nicholas magazine in 1874. Not to get off topic, but that one sounds really interesting. It tells the story of a young Native American boy named Nimpo who's taken from his tribe and forced to live with a white family. He faces many challenges along the way, including racism and discrimination. It explores themes about the understanding and respecting of different cultures. I might have to look that one up. Anyway, back to Harriet Miller. She started out writing when she was young. She started getting things published when she was 20. And then after a couple of years, she married and had children and put her writing aside from 1858 to 1869. All the work that a young mother would have to do, she chose her children over her love and desire to write, which is not an uncommon thing that has happened. And if you have ever read Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, she writes about that, the struggle of being a woman writer and what is needed for that to happen. It's a really compelling story. And so then after that, she began to study birds and get things published and written. And just looking it up, looks like she has written several Christmas stories. But this is one that kind of jumped out at me as one I enjoyed reading. I hope that you will enjoy it as well. So I invite you to come on in, make yourself comfortable here by the Christmas fire, and I'll read to you Christmas in the Alley by Harriet Mann Miller. I declare for it, tomorrow is Christmas Day, and I clean forgot all about it, said old Anne, the washerwoman, pausing in her work and holding the flat iron suspended in the air. Much good it'll do us, growled a discontented voice from the coarse bed in the corner. We haven't much extra, to be sure, answered Anne cheerfully, bringing the iron down onto the shirt bosom before her. But at least we've enough to eat and a good fire, and that's more'n some have, not 1,000 miles from here either. We might have plenty more, said the fretful voice, if you didn't think so much more of strangers than you do of your own folks' comfort, keeping a house full of beggars, as if you was a lady. Now, John, replied Anne, taking another iron from the fire, you're not half so bad as you pretend. You wouldn't have me turn them poor creatures into the streets to freeze, now would you? It's none of our business to pay rent for them, grumbled John. Every one for himself. I say, these hard times. If they can't pay, you'd ought to send them off. There's plenty as can. They'd pay quick enough if they could get work, said Anne. They're good, honest fellows, every one, and paid me regular as long as they had a cent. But what hundreds are out of work in the city? What can they do? Ah, that's none of your business. You can turn 'em out, growled John. And leave the poor children to freeze as well as starve, said Anne. Who'd ever take 'em in without money, I'd like to know. No, John? Bringing her iron down as though she meant it. I'm glad I'm well enough to wash and iron and pay my rent. And so long as I can do that and keep the hunger away from you and the child, I'll never turn the poor souls out. Leastways, not in this freezing winter weather. And here's Christmas, the old man went on whiningly, and not a penny to spend, and I needing another blanket so bad, with my rheumatiz, and haven't had a drop of tea for I don't know how long. I know it, said Anne, never mentioning that she too had been without tea. And not only that, but with small allowance of food of any kind. And I'm desperate sorry I can't get a bit of something for Katie. The child never missed a little something in her stocking before. Yes, John struck in, much you cared for your flesh and blood. The child hadn't had a thing this winter." "That's true enough," said Anne with a sigh. "And it's the hardest thing of all that I've had to keep her out of school when she was doing so beautiful." "And her feet all on the ground," growled John. "I know her shoes is bad," said Anne, hanging the shirt up on a line that stretched across the room and was already nearly full of freshly ironed clothes. "They're better than the Parker children's." "What's that to us?" almost shouted the weak old man, shaking his fist at her in his rage. "Well, keep your temper, old man," said Anne. "I'm sorry it goes so hard with you, but as long as I can stand on my feet, I shan't turn anybody out to freeze, that's certain." "How much'll you get for them?" said the miserable old man after a few moments' silence, indicating by his hand the clean clothes on the line. $2, said Anne, "and half of it must go to help make up next month's rent. I've got a good bit to make up yet, and only a week to do it in, and I shan't have another cent till day after tomorrow." "Well, I wish you'd managed to buy me a little tea," whined the old man. "Seems as if that would go right to the spot and warm up my old bones a bit." "I'll try," said Anne, revolving in her mind how she could save a few pennies from her indispensable purchases to get tea and sugar, for without sugar he would not touch it. Wearied with his usual exertion, the old man now dropped off to sleep, and Anne went softly about, folding and piling the clothes into a big basket already half full. When they were all packed in and nicely covered with a piece of clean muslin, she took an old shawl and hood from a nail in the corner, put them on, blew out the candle, for it must not burn one moment unnecessarily, and, taking up her basket, went out into the cold winter night, softly closing the door behind her. The house was on an alley, but as soon as she turned the corner, she was in the bright streets, glittering with lamps and gay people. The shop windows were brilliant with Christmas displays, and thousands of warmly dressed buyers were lingering before them, laughing and chatting and selecting their purchases. Surely it seemed as if there could be no want here. As quickly as her burden would let her, the old washerwoman passed through the crowd into a broad street and rang the basement bell of a large, showy house. "Oh, it's the washerwoman," said a flashy-looking servant who answered the bell. "Set the basket right in here. Mrs. Keith can't look them over tonight. There's company in the parlor. Miss Carey's Christmas party." "Ask her to please pay me, at least a part," said old Anne hastily. "I don't see how I can do without the money. I counted on it." "I'll ask her," said the pert young woman, turning to go upstairs. "But it's no use." Returning in a moment, she delivered the message. "She has no change tonight. You're to come in the morning." "Dear me," thought Anne, as she plodded back through the streets. "It'll be even worse than I expected, for there's not a morsel to eat in the house and not a penny to buy one with. Well, the Lord will provide, the good book says, but it's mighty dark days, and it's hard to believe." Entering the house, Anne sat down silently before the expiring fire. She was tired, her bones ached, and she was faint for want of food. Wearily, she rested her head on her hands and tried to think of some way to get a few cents. But she had nothing she could sell or pawn. Everything she could do without had gone before, in similar emergencies. After sitting there some time and revolving plan after plan, only to find them all impossible, she was forced to conclude that they must go supperless to bed. Her husband grumbled, and Katie, who came in from a neighbor's, cried with hunger, and after they were asleep, old Anne crept into bed to keep warm, more disheartened than she had been all winter. If we could only see a little way ahead. All this time, the darkest the house on the alley had seen, help was on the way to them. A kind-hearted city missionary, visiting one of the unfortunate families living in the upper rooms of old Anne's house, had learned from them of the noble charity of the humble old washerwoman. It was more than princely charity, for she not only denied herself nearly every comfort, but she endured the reproaches of her husband and the tears of her child. Telling the story to a party of his friends this Christmas Eve, their hearts were troubled, and they at once emptied their purses into his hands for her. and the gift was at that very moment in the pocket of the missionary, waiting for morning to make her Christmas happy. Christmas morning broke clear and cold. Anne was up early as usual, made her fire with the last of her coal, cleared up her 2 rooms, and, leaving her husband and Katie in bed, was about starting out to try and get her money to provide a breakfast for them. At the door she met the missionary. "Good morning, Anne," said he. "I wish you a Merry Christmas." "Oh, thank you, sir," she said cheerfully. "The same to yourself." "Have you been to breakfast already?" asked the missionary. "No, sir," said Anne. "I was just going out for it." "I haven't either," said he, "but I couldn't bear to wait until I had eaten breakfast before I brought you your Christmas present. I suspect you haven't had any yet." Anne smiled. "Indeed, sir, I haven't had one since I can remember." "Well, I have one for you. Come in and I'll tell you all about it." Too much amazed for words, Anne led him into the room. The missionary opened his purse and handed her a roll of bills. "Why, what?" she gasped, taking it mechanically. "Some friends of mine heard of your generous treatment of the poor families upstairs," he went on, "and they send you this, with their respects and best wishes for Christmas. Do just what you please with it. It is wholly yours." "No, thanks," he went on as she struggled to speak. "It's not from me. Just enjoy it. That's all. It has done them more good to give than it can you to receive." And before she could speak a word, he was gone. What did the old washerwoman do? Well, first she fell on her knees and buried her agitated face in the bedclothes. After a while she became aware of a storm of words from her husband, and she got up, subdued as much as possible her agitation, and tried to answer his frantic questions. "Well, how much did he give you, old stupid?" he screamed. "Can't you speak? Or are you struck dumb? Wake up! I just wish I could reach you. I'd shake you till your teeth rattled." If his vicious looks were a sign, it was evident that he only lacked the strength to be as good as his word. Anne roused herself from her stupor and spoke at last. "I don't know. I'll count it." She unrolled the bills and began. "Oh, Lord!" she exclaimed excitedly. "Here's $10 bills. 1, 2, 3, and a 20. That makes 5, and 5 are 55, 60, 70, 80, 85, 90, 100. And 2 and 5 are 7, and 2 and 1 are 10, 20, 25, 125. Why, I'm rich," she shouted. "Bless the Lord. Oh, this is the glorious Christmas day. I knew he'd provide. Katie, Katie!" She screamed at the door of the other room where the child lay asleep. "Merry Christmas to you, darling. Now you can have some shoes, and a new dress, and breakfast, and a regular Christmas dinner. Oh, I believe I shall go crazy." But she did not. Joy seldom hurts people, and she was brought back to everyday affairs by the querulous voice of her husband. "Now I will have my tea and a new blanket and some tobacco. How I have wanted a pipe." And he went on enumerating his wants while Anne bustled about, putting away most of her money and once more getting ready to go out. "I'll run out and get some breakfast," she said, "but don't you tell a soul about the money." "No, they'll rob us," shrieked the old man. "Nonsense. I'll hide it well, but I want to keep it a secret for another reason. Mind, Katie, don't you tell?" "No," said Katie with wide eyes. "But can I truly have a new frock, Mammy, and new shoes? And is it really Christmas?" "It's really Christmas, darling," said Anne. "You'll see what Mammy'll bring home to you after breakfast." The luxurious meal of sausages, potatoes, and hot tea was soon smoking on the table and was eagerly devoured by Katie and her father. But Anne could not eat much. She was absent-minded and only drank a cup of tea. As soon as breakfast was over, she left Katie to wash the dishes and started out again. She walked slowly down the street, revolving a great plan in her mind. "Let me see," she said to herself. "They shall have a happy day for once. I suppose John'll grumble, but the Lord has sent me this money, and I mean to use part of it to make one good day for them." Having settled this in her mind, she walked on more quickly and visited various shops in the neighborhood. When at last she went home, her big basket was stuffed as full as it could hold, and she carried a bundle besides. "Here's your tea, John," she said cheerfully as she unpacked the basket. a whole pound of it, and sugar and tobacco and a new pipe. Give me some now, said the old man eagerly. Don't wait to take out the rest of the things. And here's a new frock for you, Katie, old Anne went on, after making John happy with his treasures. A real bright one, and a pair of shoes, and some real woolen stockings. Oh, how warm you'll be. Oh, how nice, Mammy, cried Katie, jumping about. When will you make my frock? Tomorrow, answered the mother, and you can go to school again. Oh, goody, she began, but her face fell. If only Molly Parker could go too. You wait and see, answered Anne with a knowing look. Who knows what Christmas will bring to Molly Parker? Now, here's a nice big roast, the happy woman went on, still unpacking, and potatoes, and turnips, and cabbage, and bread, and butter, and coffee, and... What in the world? You going to give a party? Asked the old man, between the puffs, staring at her in wonder. I'll tell you just what I'm going to do, said Anne firmly, bracing herself for opposition. And it's as good as done, so you needn't say a word about it. I'm going to have a Christmas dinner, and I'm going to invite every blessed soul in this house to come. They shall be warm and full for once in their lives, please God. And Katie, she went on breathlessly, before the old man had sufficiently recovered from his astonishment to speak, go right upstairs now and invite every one of them from the fathers down to Mrs. Parker's baby to come to dinner at 3 o'clock. We'll have to keep fashionable hours. It's so late now. And mind, Katie, not a word about the money. And hurry back, child. I want you to help me. To her surprise, the opposition from her husband was less than she expected. The genial tobacco seemed to have quieted his nerves, and even opened his heart. Grateful for this, Anne resolved that his pipe should never lack tobacco while she could work. But now the cares of dinner absorbed her. The meat and vegetables were prepared, the pudding made, and the long table spread, though she had to borrow every table in the house, and every dish to have enough to go around. At 3 o'clock, when the guests came in, it was really a very pleasant sight. The bright warm fire, the long table, covered with a substantial, and, to them, a luxurious meal, all smoking hot. John, in his neatly brushed suit, in an armchair at the foot of the table, Anne, in a bustle of hurry and welcome, and a plate and a seat for every one. How the half-starved creatures enjoyed it. How the children stuffed and the parents looked on with a happiness that was very near to tears. How old John actually smiled and urged them to send back their plates again and again, and how Anne, the washerwoman, was the life and soul of it all. I can't half tell. After dinner, when the poor women lodgers insisted on clearing up, and the poor men sat down by the fire to smoke, for old John actually passed around his beloved tobacco, Anne quietly slipped out for a few minutes, took 4 large bundles from a closet under the stairs, and disappeared upstairs. She was scarcely missed before she was back again. Well, of course, it was a great day in the house on the alley, and the guests sat long into the twilight before the warm fire, talking of their old homes in the fatherland, the hard winter, and prospects for work in the spring. When at last they returned to the chilly discomfort of their own rooms, each family found a package containing a new warm dress and pair of shoes for every woman and child in the family. And I have enough left, said Anne, the washerwoman, to herself when she was reckoning up the expenses of the day, to buy my coal and pay my rent till spring, so I can save my old bones a bit. And sure, John can't grumble at their staying now, for it's all along of keeping them that I had such a blessed Christmas day at all. The end. Oh, what a very sweet story. I found that one to be. You see a lot of themes like this in Christmas stories, especially from 100+ years ago. Those who are often without tend to be the most generous, and I think it's because they know what poverty is like. Scrooge, when he is greedy and holds on to his money, he has a lot of it. He wouldn't miss it, and it wouldn't hurt him to try to help somebody. I like the quote from the narrator that says that joy seldom hurts people, and that's so true. Anne, the washerwoman, she found joy in giving, just as the Bible taught. When you think about Christmas, you think about giving gifts and helping those in need. And I love to read stories where that's expressed. Some of the characters, her husband, John, oh, what a jerk. I just wanted to scream at him. But even by the end of the story, he was coming around and he was sharing his tobacco. I'm not a smoker myself, but I know back then that was a common thing. That really pictures that welcoming in to his home, that he is sharing that tobacco and they're sitting around the fire, that which symbolizes the hearth and home. And, he had a little bit of a change of heart. It's such a contrast between Anne and her husband, John, that when they get that money, her first thought is how I can help other people. And his first thought is I can get what I want. And that really demonstrates really quite the approach to what we have, right? Am I going to keep this all for myself, or I have extra? Who can I share it with? What can I do with it? How can I save it? Thinking beyond ourselves. I think that's what the story is trying to get us to do. And what better time than at Christmas time? As we think about honoring Christmas in our heart and keeping it all the year, I know charities often see a lot of uptick in donations during the holidays, but what about that time in between holidays? Maybe this would be a great time to get involved in a charity in some way. Recently, my wife was able to participate in a cancer charity event. She and a couple of her friends sang at. It was a 5K kind of deal, and then at the end there was like a talent show kind of situation where people from the community would. It was usually singing, and they just got together to sing songs to encourage the families who have been hit by cancer and who have struggled with cancer themselves. And so she and a couple of her friends sang a couple of songs, and others did some musical things as well, just to encourage them. Sometimes what people need, they just need somebody to encourage them, to be reminded that they are not alone in that struggle, that they're being seen, and you're willing to help, whatever that help might look like. So it might be money, or it might be giving a car ride to somebody who needs to go to the doctors for cancer, for treatments, and maybe they're too sick to drive themselves. When me and my whole family were sick, one of our neighbors brought over some dinner for us. It was this delicious pot roast with the potatoes and carrots all cooked in the crock pot, and it was so good. And just bringing over a meal was so kind and thoughtful, and it really meant a lot. And we were very grateful for that. Yes, I acknowledge these stories sometimes can seem a little over the top, a little bit highly sentimental, but that's what Christmas is all about, right? Is letting the emotions and sentiment just go. And this story was a lot of fun to read, because I think of all these people, Anne was the happiest because she knew the true value of what she had. And she knew that it was definitely better to give than to receive. Well, that's our show for today. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you to all who support this podcast, whether you make a donation through Ko-fi.com, that link is in the show notes, or you share on your social medias, or you just download and enjoy and listen to yourself. Thank you so much for that. Speaking of donations, I know I still owe several of you some bookmarks and stickers. I am going to do my best to get on top of that now, as we're getting here halfway through the year. I am woefully behind, and I do apologize, but you all are so kind to help support this show, and I am grateful more than words can say. So thank you so much. Let's work together to continue to spread Christmas cheer every day of the year. And so with that, until next time, let us remember to honor Christmas in our hearts and try to keep it all the year. Have a very Merry Christmas.